It was a quiet morning when the last faint signal from Flight 327, a commercial jet en route to a distant city, flickered on radar screens, only to go missing without a trace. The world watched as investigators scrambled, hoping against hope for a miracle. What they would discover, however, wasn't a miracle. It was a haunting truth, one that would change everything they knew about aviation disasters. When the wreckage of Flight 327 was finally found, scattered across a dense, remote forest in the early hours of the morning, the world assumed the answers would come quickly. Flight recorders, black boxes, are the linchpins of modern investigation, crucial for piecing together the final moments of a doomed flight. But for this crash, this inexplicable tragedy, the flight recorder was never found. And the questions, they multiplied. No one could explain it. No one knew how a black box, considered the most durable piece of equipment on board any commercial plane, could simply disappear. With no data to guide the investigation, the truth was as elusive as the missing recorder. The result? A case that should have been solved years ago, but instead remains shrouded in mystery. It's late autumn in the northern outskirts of Avalon City, a once thriving airport hub, now a quiet, somber place. The air is crisp, a thin fog clinging to the earth, as if the city itself is reluctant to let go of its secrets. The community is no stranger to loss, but this was different. The crash site, deep in a shadowed forest miles from the nearest road, feels almost untouched by time. The trees stand like silent sentinels, their thick trunks surrounding the wreckage as though they've been holding the secrets of that night, protecting something they were never meant to. When the authorities finally located the remains of Flight 327, they found a plane in pieces, its fuselage scattered across the forest floor, twisted and burned. Yet there was one significant, mysterious anomaly: no black box. The search for the missing flight recorder dragged on for days, then weeks. For a crash of this magnitude, a crash that took 187 lives, it was unprecedented. The lack of the recorder was a grim reminder that not all cases are meant to be solved. The investigators were left with nothing but the wreckage, the emotional weight of grieving families, and a void where the answers should have been. What made this case even more baffling wasn't just the missing flight recorder. It was the contradictory details that seemed to defy logic. First, the flight path. Witnesses reported strange behavior from the plane in the minutes before the crash. The aircraft had been descending rapidly for reasons unknown, far too quickly for a standard emergency landing. Despite the sudden drop in altitude, the cockpit had failed to issue any distress signal, a rarity for such a serious situation. The final words from the cockpit were a mere garbled transmission: "We're going down." Second, the debris. The plane had been ripped apart in a way that seemed to defy natural forces. There were no signs of explosions, no fire from the engines. The plane wasn't just destroyed, it was obliterated, as if some unseen hand had torn it apart. The wreckage didn't suggest mechanical failure or sabotage, but rather something far more sinister, something that couldn't be explained by any conventional aviation theory. Third, the survivors. A single passenger had miraculously survived the crash, a young woman named Kate Harper, who had somehow managed to escape with only minor injuries. Her testimony would have been invaluable, but she was never found. She vanished from the scene, never making it to the hospital. The authorities could not explain her disappearance. Her body was never recovered from the wreckage, and no trace of her was found in the forest. It was as if she had evaporated, leaving behind only questions. The investigation began with the usual protocols: forensic analysis of the wreckage, interviews with eyewitnesses, and a comprehensive review of the pilot's history. But as the weeks turned into months, it became clear that this was no ordinary crash investigation. The aviation experts combed through the cockpit voice recorder and flight data from the other planes in the area that night. Everything seemed normal. No signs of external interference or weather anomalies. Nothing. The cause of the crash should have been clear by now, yet there was no explanation. The investigators were forced to turn to more unconventional theories. One lead came from the strange disappearance of Kate Harper. A few weeks after the crash, a local man claimed to have seen her in the nearby town of Eldridge, miles from the crash site. But when investigators arrived, the town had no record of her ever being there. It was as if she had disappeared into thin air once again. Could she have known something? Could she have been a key witness if only she could have been found? Then, there was the issue of the missing flight recorder. The area where Flight 327 had gone down was thoroughly searched, yet the recorder had never been found. Forensic teams combed through the wreckage, scanning each piece, but no black box was uncovered. It was the most baffling part of the entire investigation. Theories began to emerge. Some believed that the recorder had been taken before the authorities arrived, perhaps by someone with knowledge of the crash's true cause. Others suspected foul play, an act of sabotage, or even a cover-up by a government agency with interests in the crash's outcome. The official explanation, of course, was that the recorder was lost in the crash's chaos. But no one bought it. It felt wrong. It didn't fit. As the months passed, the emotional toll of the investigation began to weigh heavily on the investigators involved. Detective Clara Jennings, the lead investigator on the case, found herself unable to sleep, replaying every detail of the crash in her mind. The missing flight recorder became an obsession for her. It wasn't just a piece of equipment. It was the key to solving the case, and without it, she felt as though they were all stumbling in the dark. "I can't let it go," Clara said in one of her interviews. "Something's not right. I can feel it." She wasn't alone in her fixation. The case consumed the local community too. Families who had lost loved ones grew more suspicious with each passing day. The lack of answers only fueled their anger. Rumors began circulating that the crash was not an accident but a deliberate act, an act of terrorism, or perhaps something more insidious. The theories were endless, and the town was growing desperate for closure. Just when it seemed that the case had reached a dead end, a new lead surfaced. A small, disjointed piece of evidence that reignited the investigation. A local journalist, Laura Cross, received an anonymous tip that pointed her to an underground network of aviation insiders. These individuals had purportedly been involved in a cover-up of the crash's true cause. The tip was cryptic, but it hinted at a deeper conspiracy, one that stretched beyond the flight itself and into the very heart of the aviation industry. Laura's investigation into this lead uncovered a shocking connection between several high-ranking officials in the aviation world and companies involved in the flight's maintenance. Theories now pointed to corporate negligence, intentional obfuscation, and the possibility that the flight recorder's disappearance was no accident. After years of searching, the case of Flight 327 remains unsolved. The flight recorder was never found, and the true cause of the crash continues to elude investigators. In the end, the mystery of what happened to Flight 327 and why its flight recorder went missing remains one of the most chilling and haunting unsolved aviation mysteries in history. The investigation has left scars on everyone involved, especially Clara Jennings, whose obsession with the case has consumed her life. The town of Aviland has never fully recovered, and the families of the victims still search for answers that may never come. The disappearance of the flight recorder continues to haunt them all, a constant reminder that some mysteries are never meant to be solved. As the final credits roll, the haunting question remains, what really happened to Flight 327? And will the truth ever come to light?